Hey y'all, what's up? I'm Jess. Welcome to my greenhouse here at Roots and Refuge Farm. I've got an inbox full of the same question. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that are wondering it that are not asking. What do you do if you planted frost tender varieties too soon and there's a cold front coming through, like right now? We are past our estimated last frost date. When I started planting some of my frost tender things, on the 10-day forecast, there wasn't a single night that it was even remotely near freezing, and now a cold front has come through and we have multiple nights that are dangerously close to freezing. So if you're in this situation, what do you do? Well, first, don't freak out. It's gonna be okay. Anytime I get a message, either right before, right at, or right after an estimated frost date, where people are asking me, hey, do you think that it's safe for me to go ahead and plant? I always ask the same question, and that is, well, do you like to gamble? Because truly, estimated last frost dates are estimated. That is the key word in that phraseology. We're still dealing with the weather. There are factors that are very far beyond our control here, and if you want to err on the side of caution, wait a few weeks after your estimated last frost date to put anything that's frost tender out in your garden. You are taking a risk, especially if you go early. You are taking a risk. Now, I'm not condemning that. I am actually a risk taker. I usually plant things out before and just take a gamble, and then that means every single year, right now, whenever there's a freezing forecast coming after I've got tender stuff, I'm doing this scramble right here, but it's okay. To be fair, for a lot of new gardeners, they just go by what's for sale in the stores, and so for many new gardeners, they don't know any better. So you might have started plants at the store thinking, well, they wouldn't have put them out here if it wasn't okay to plant them, and then you go home and plant your whole garden and a freeze comes through and kills your plants. So you can't really go by the fact that these things are on the shelves in the store, because that really doesn't make a difference. When it comes down to the spring and it comes down to planting time, you really need to be living by your forecast, keeping an eye on it and making sure that you're not putting things out and putting them in a place where they're going to be in danger of freezing. In gardening terminology, if you see killing frost or just a freeze, that's just talking about 32 degrees. If you see a hard freeze, that's talking about 28 degrees. For the sake of brassicas, all your cool weather stuff, your root vegetables, all of that stuff that you may have planted out 6 weeks ago, those are fine. They can go below freezing and you don't have to worry about that at all. So, however, here in the spring, whenever people are really itching to plant out their tomatoes and their peppers, their eggplants, their tender herbs like basil, beans, lots of flowers, a lot of those things are very, very frost tender, which means if those plants are exposed to a killing frost, 32 degrees, even for just a little while, what happens is the cell structure in those plants, those cells become overwhelmed by that frost, and whenever they warm back up, it basically explodes the cell walls of those plants. And that's what happens when you go out after your plants have frozen and they're like brown mush. As they thaw, they get mushier and mushier. That's because the cell walls of those plants have been destroyed. While some of those may be able to recover from a very short exposure to a very mild frost, many of those plants, just a brief period of being frozen, it kills them and there's no recovery for them. This also includes melons and squash and cucumbers, all those things that you're like dying to get in your garden right now. The issue is if you've already got those things in your garden, you know that frost is coming, you want to do something to protect those. Now, I will tell you that the tips I'm giving you today, don't choose to live here. Like, this is a thing of, oops, we made a mistake, what can we do to try to save it? I really don't suggest, if you look on your forecast and you see that there are freezing temperatures coming, to just go ahead and plant all your plants and lean into these measures to make it okay. You want to avoid this situation because this is a risky situation. If you were like really, really hasty and you put plants in and now you're going to be having a very hard freeze or winter precipitation like snow or ice, my suggestion would be probably to dig them up. If you're looking at like very cold temperatures, well below a hard freeze. The measures I'm telling you today are probably not going to protect plants beyond just a mild freeze. These things are going to add a few degrees and pull your plants through like a bad night where the days are still getting warm. But if you've got like some real winter weather and you've already put a spring garden in, my suggestion would be to backpedal on that as much as you can. Understanding that what you're trying to avoid with losing your plants to a freeze is trying to avoid the breakdown of the cell walls of that plant. Kind of gives you a little bit of ground to stand on to know really all you have to do, and again we're talking about short term, a night or two, dropping down right at or right below freezing temperatures. What you're trying to do is just maintain enough warmth in and around that plant to keep the plant from freezing, to keep the cell walls from breaking down. Now, one thing that you can do that can help this and preserve the cell walls of your plant is you can water your plant. Water can be your friend as long as you do this right. The day that you see that there's going to be a freezing low that night, go out that day, and you want the temperature to be above 40. For those of you who are Celsius, I'll put all the conversions on the screen, and water your plant, preferably earlier in the day, like late morning or so. Just as soon as the temperature gets above 40, you want the plant to have long enough to soak in the water. Now, you do not want to just completely saturate the ground. You don't want it sopping wet. If you have poorly draining soil, don't put a ton of water on it. You definitely don't want your plant sitting in standing water. But basically, if you make sure that that plant has water to soak up and that the soil has water to soak up, by the time it comes around tonight, that water in the plant is going to insulate those cell walls, and it's actually going to allow the soil to hang on to some of the energy and the sun from the day. So it's going to keep it just slightly warmer. It's going to make it just slightly more protected against that frost. Again, not soaking wet. Water it earlier in the day when the temperature is over 40 degrees, but definitely water the day that you're expecting a freeze that night. The next thing that you can do is cover your vulnerable plant. Here I have some new little bean sprouts that are coming up here. Beans are very frost tender, and so I do not want these brand new sprouts to freeze. So all I'm gonna do is take some straw and come and mulch over these beans. Just lay it right down on top of that. And I'll actually get some more straw and just mulch all around here. And that is just gonna insulate those little seedlings from the cold air, and it's going to help the soil hang on to the warmth from the day. I'm using straw to mulch, but if you had leaf mulch, if you had some hay, if it's something that you don't want to leave on your garden beyond the freeze, you can always take it back off again, but it can help get new seedlings through a cold night. If you have potted plants, seedlings in trays, anything that you've got outside that can easily be moved, just take it in your house. Even if you're taking it into a place that doesn't have a lot of light, just take it in overnight. You can put it back out in the morning once the sun's out and you're going to be above those freezing temperatures. It's a bit of a pain to have to move things in and out like that, but it's better than losing your plants. Now, if you have starts, like I've got these cucumbers here, and these are a little larger. The obvious solution to freezing temperatures and protecting plants is something like this, which is called frost fabric, or frost fleece is what it's sometimes called. This is what you use to make row covers. This protects plants and keeps them a few degrees above the outside temperature, keeps the soil warmer. Most new gardeners probably don't have a lot of this laying around. If you do have access to something like this, but you don't have structures like row covers, you can literally just lay this over your bed, put rocks around it to keep it from blowing off, and that's a great thing to have. But if you don't have something like this, and many people don't, one solution is to just use a bed sheet, because a bed sheet is breathable. You don't have to worry about this suffocating your plants or causing issues, and you literally just go out and lay this over your beds, kind of tuck it in around the edges around your plants, use rocks or something else heavy to keep it so it doesn't blow off, and this is going to keep that frost off your plants and help the soil maintain some of its heat. It'll trap the heat from the soil in, and this does a pretty good job of keeping your plants a couple of degrees above the outside temperature. Now, the thing with this is, obviously, if you've got 3 cold nights coming up, you're not gonna go put this on your plants and leave it for 3 days. You need to go take it off every morning and put it back on. I like to do kind of late afternoon while the sun is still shining, so you are able to trap some heat in there, but you want to take it off and let your plants have some sunlight throughout the day. Another option is to create just a small cover. You can use a plastic tub like this and just turn it upside down over your plants. You would want to have something that is more enclosed. Again, I'd like to put this on in the middle of the afternoon to trap some of that afternoon sunlight's heat, but I don't want to keep it on for multiple days, especially if there's not any sort of air circulation, because that can cause issues. But more than anything, what happens is this really filters the light, and even in just a few days it can cause your plants to start getting kind of leggy and stuff. So you would want to put this on in the afternoon, take it off in the morning once the temperatures have warmed up. And here's a little milk jug. Same exact thing here. This is one of the easier things that you can do, because you can really isolate small plants like this by just covering them up with this milk jug and making sure that the edges are making contact with your soil. You don't have to use things that are clear. If you just have a bucket and you come out in the evening and put that bucket over your plant, don't forget it and leave it on for days, but taking it off the next morning, that'll help keep that cold air off of the plant. If you end up using something glass, you can use vases or big jars, things like that, and just do this exact same thing, making a little cover. But make sure you do not leave that on through the heat of the day when the sun is bright, because the sun going through that glass, I mean, it can easily get 40 or 50 degrees warmer underneath glass, and you may actually unintentionally burn your plants if you leave glass on them through the day. The purpose of this video is really talking about emergency measures to take when you plant your garden and then you're surprised by a late freeze. However, I'm getting a lot of questions as well with like screenshots of 10-day forecasts saying, hey, do you think that this will be okay? Do you think this will hurt my garden? Where there are like a couple of nights that are cool, like 40 degrees. For the most part, for most of the things that you put out in a spring garden that are frost tender, like a couple of cool nights probably not gonna affect them. Now, you could apply the measures I'm talking about today to try to add warmth to your plants overnight. I would personally say that's probably not necessary. I will tell you, however, things like peppers and eggplants really do better if they are not exposed to cool nights. So if you can hold off planting those things, and if you do have cool nights, I would say those might be the only plants that you would consider taking these measures for nights that weren't close to freezing but that were cool. Really, it's best and ideal to wait to plant out any of your frost tender stuff until your nights are consistently like 50 degrees or above. It's hard to do when you're excited to put in a garden. Now, I don't know if this is true. This is something that I've read, so for the sake of full disclosure, this is secondhand information. But I have actually read from multiple sources that seemed very trustworthy that if your plants have been exposed to freezing temperatures, a very mild frost, and they are frost tender plants, that if you don't have the opportunity to cover them and protect them, that if you go out before the day warms up, so like before the sun is really getting up, and you water those plants, it basically will remove the frost and give the cell walls of the plant an opportunity to warm up slowly so that they're not completely destroyed. So basically those cell walls don't explode, they can transition into warmth in a slower way. And that is supposed to save them from being destroyed. They'll probably still be damaged, but they may pull through. I don't know if that's true or not, but I have read that a couple of times and I've never actually done it. It seems a lot simpler to me, though, to just go and throw a bed sheet or try to get some mulch of some kind, even if you just have to gather up leaves out of the yard, to go and put on and around those plants to protect them from a mild freeze. I do hope this helps you, and that if you are in a place of panic, I do hope that your plants pull through and you have a beautiful and fruitful gardening year. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today. I bless you. Until next time.